Hello, friends. Today, I'm sharing a story that begins in the quiet hum of an April afternoon, but don't let that calm fool you, it's the kind of quiet that hides a storm. My name is Ava Harper, and this is a tale of justice, dignity, and the unbreakable spirit of unity. Let's step into a suburban parking lot, where a single moment sparks a reckoning no one saw coming. The gray sedan eased into the lot behind Willow Creek Elementary, its engine purring softly before falling silent. Ava Harper, 42, stepped out, her cream blouse catching the soft sunlight. Her low-heeled shoes tapped faintly on the pavement as she glanced at her watch, 6 minutes until school let out. She opened the trunk, retrieved a bag of homemade oatmeal cookies, and returned to the driver's seat, settling in with a calm that felt almost deliberate, like someone who knew how to wait without wasting energy. Ava wasn't here by chance. Her nephew, Jaden, 9 years old, was about to bound out of those school doors, his backpack swinging. She'd promised to pick him up while his mother, her sister, worked a double shift at the hospital. Ava's life was one of precision, federal judge by day, aunt and confidant by afternoon. But in this moment, she was just a woman in a parking lot, unnoticed by the world. Or so she thought. 2 minutes later, a patrol car rolled in, no sirens, no lights, but its presence tightened the air like a clenched fist. 2 officers stepped out, Daniel Walsh, 35, tall, square-jawed, with a buzz cut that screamed authority, and Ethan Cole, 29, leaner, with quick, suspicious eyes. They made a beeline for Ava's sedan, their boots heavy on the asphalt. Ava lowered her window, her face composed, her dark eyes steady. "Ma'am, this your car?" Walsh's voice was low, laced with an edge that wasn't a question but a challenge. Ava nodded, her hands resting lightly on the wheel. "License, registration, and proof of parking," he added, his knuckle tapping the window frame, irritating, not forceful, but enough to set a tone. Ava handed over her documents, including a digital parking receipt from her phone app, paid for 90 minutes. Walsh barely glanced at it before muttering, "Black woman in a new sedan?" "Yeah, right." His words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, like a blade flicked open. Ava's expression didn't shift, not anger, not fear, just a stillness that seemed to unnerve him. He took the parking slip, tore it in half, then ripped it again, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. His boot ground them into the pavement, a slow, careless act of contempt. From the back seat, Jaden's small voice trembled. "Aunt Ava?" His eyes were wide, fixed on the officers. Cole shot him a look. "Kid, stay quiet, or she's not seeing you for a while." Ava turned, her hand gently touching Jaden's head. "Sit back, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but firm, a tether in the chaos. That tenderness clashed with Walsh's next words, "What are you doing here?" "Loitering near a school's not a good look." "Picking up my nephew," Ava replied, her tone even, unmistakable. Cole circled the car, peering inside. "We've had reports of suspicious vehicles," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You paid for parking, sure, but I'm not convinced about you." He glanced at Walsh, who stepped back, his hand brushing his holster. A soft click, the safety strap released. It was subtle, but Ava's gaze caught it, etching the moment into memory. "Step out," Walsh ordered. Ava unbuckled her seatbelt, her movements measured, neither defiant nor rushed. She stepped onto the pavement, her hands visible. Cole moved toward Jaden. "School security can hold him," he said, detached. Ava's voice cut through. "I'm his legal guardian." Walsh smirked. "Not if you're detained." Cold steel bit into her wrists as handcuffs snapped shut. Jaden's sobs echoed, a child's cry slicing through the sunny afternoon. Ava didn't raise her head, didn't protest, but her eyes scanned Walsh and Cole, memorizing every detail, Walsh's sneer, Cole's fleeting hesitation. As they led her to the patrol car, her silence wasn't surrender. It was something else, something they'd learned to fear. The patrol car's back seat was hard, the air stale with the faint tang of disinfectant. Ava Harper sat upright, wrists cuffed, her gaze fixed on the passing streets. Walsh drove, his knuckles tight on the wheel, while Cole tapped his phone, smirking as he typed a caption for an internal livestream, "Caught a suspect near the school zone." He chuckled, glancing back at Ava. "This'll get some likes." Ava's face remained unreadable, her silence louder than any retort. At the station, they marched her through a buzzing corridor. A desk officer smirked. "Filling the quota early today?" Ava's eyes flicked to a faded photo on the wall, Walsh, younger, grinning at a commendation ceremony. She filed it away, her mind a steel trap. In the screening room, Cole handed her a sheet with the alphabet. "Read it backward, Z to A, gotta check if you're sober." His grin was thin, mocking. Ava met his gaze. "What am I charged with?" Walsh leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I don't like your attitude." "No law, no statute, just power, raw and unchecked." Ava read the sheet flawlessly, her voice steady, each letter a quiet defiance. Cole muttered, "Memorized it, huh?" Walsh kicked the desk. "Smart enough to play innocent." A female officer, Officer Reed, entered, whispering to Cole. He nodded. "Kids with school security. Social services can take it from there." Ava stepped forward, her voice rising for the first time. "I'm his legal guardian." Cole didn't look at her. "Not while you're here." Jaden's small footsteps faded down the hall. Ava closed her eyes for 3 seconds, not to calm herself but to lock away the pain. Reed led her to a holding cell, gray walls, cement floor, a flickering light. "Shoes off," Reed snapped. "No heels in here." Ava glanced at her flats, then complied, placing them neatly by the wall. Reed scoffed. "This isn't a movie. No heroes here." Alone, Ava sat on the bench, her bare feet cold against the floor. A stack of blank paper lay on a table, no pen. She raised her hand. Reed tossed a ballpoint pen, its cap loose. Ava wrote, in firm, even strokes, "No place can be lawless toward humanity." Reed returned, glanced at the words, and crumpled the paper, tossing it into the trash. "No manifestos," she said, slamming the door. The cell's light buzzed, casting shadows on water-stained walls. A camera in the corner was off, or so they thought. In a hidden nook, a second lens, unnoticed by the officers, recorded silently. Ava sat, hands on her knees, eyes forward, as if addressing an invisible jury. No one interrogated her. No lawyer arrived. No rights were read. To them, she was just a black woman, quiet, alone, unworthy of protocol. But Ava's silence wasn't weakness. It was a blade, honed over years of enduring slights, rejections, and dismissals. She'd learned to wait, to watch, to let others reveal themselves. Walsh and Cole thought they'd caged her. They didn't know they'd just stepped into her courtroom, a courtroom where truth, not badges, held sway. The holding cell's silence was broken by the clank of a door. Officer Reed returned, her eyes wary, escorting Ava to the intake area. Something had shifted, not in Ava, but in the air behind the station's walls. The intake room was sterile, lit by harsh fluorescence. A technician, chewing gum, motioned for Ava to place her hand on a fingerprint scanner. She complied, her fingertips steady. The screen flashed, data not recognized. He frowned. Again. No signal. On the third try, he pressed her hand harder. Still nothing. "Ever been arrested?" he asked, squinting. Ava shook her head. "Systems glitching," he muttered, calling tech support. Unseen by him, Ava's sleeve hid a thin, transparent glove, imperceptible, designed to leave no trace. She'd worn it not out of paranoia but habit, a relic from her days as a civil rights investigator. The technician gave up, handing her an intake form. Ava wrote one name, A. Harper. No birth date, no middle initial, just enough to unsettle. The records clerk paused, staring at Harper. His eyes flickered with unease, as if the name tugged at a buried memory. He said nothing, passing the form along. In the waiting area, a freelance journalist, Marcus Tate, glanced at the department's shared screen. A. Harper appeared briefly. He froze. He'd seen that name in a legal journal, Judge Ava Harper, a rising star in federal courts. Could it be her? He hesitated, then typed a quick note on his phone. Outside, a 12-second clip surfaced on a Reddit forum, grainy but unmistakable, a black woman, cuffed, led from a car, her gaze unyielding. The caption read, "Justice for the judge?" It spread like wildfire, hitting 1 million views in hours. Tate's suspicion grew. He emailed 2 newsrooms anonymously, linking the clip with a note, "Not every civilian is a civilian." By morning, the clip was everywhere. News anchors stumbled over phrases like, "possible judicial figure." At the station, Ava sat in a temporary holding room, uncuffed but unguarded, as if the system didn't know what to do with her. She glanced at a digital board, verifying. No time estimate. She turned to Reed. "Am I released, or are you inventing charges?" Reed's glare faltered, and she walked away. In the station server room, a data line flashed, matching Ava's name to a federal judicial database. It vanished quickly, unnoticed by the staff. But Marcus Tate's email had reached a producer at a major network. They cross-checked the name, finding a photo of Judge Harper at a reform conference. The resemblance was undeniable. Questions exploded. Why was a federal judge detained? Why no record? Why the silence? Ava was escorted out without explanation. No bail, no charges, just a curt, "You're free." She stepped into the sunlight, her gray sedan waiting. She drove to the federal courthouse, the radio humming with breaking news. Unconfirmed reports suggest the woman in the viral clip is a federal judge. Ava didn't react. Her eyes, in the rearview mirror, held no triumph, just resolve. She knew the real trial was about to begin, and this time, she'd be the one asking the questions. The oak doors of courtroom 2A swung open, and a hush fell over the packed gallery. Ava Harper, 42, stepped through, her black judicial robe flowing like a shadow of authority. No clerk announced her. No nameplate was needed. Her presence alone stopped the rustle of papers, the whispers of reporters, and the nervous coughs of the defendants. Daniel Walsh and Ethan Cole, in ill-fitting suits, sat at the defense table, their confidence fraying. They'd been summoned for a civil lawsuit, unlawful arrest, procedural violations, reputational harm. They thought it routine. They were wrong. Ava took her seat at the bench, her movements deliberate, her face a mask of calm. She tapped her pen 3 times on the wood, a rhythm that seemed to anchor the room. Her eyes swept across the courtroom, pausing briefly on Walsh, then Cole. Neither could hold her gaze. Walsh shifted, his fingers twitching. Cole's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the floor. Ava opened the case file, her voice clear, measured, cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. "Have all defendants arrived?" she asked. No one answered. The police department's attorney, a wiry man named Gerald Klein, rose, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we confirm all parties are present," and Ava's glance silenced him. It wasn't sharp or cold, but it carried a weight that made him feel exposed, as if every word he'd rehearsed was suddenly inadequate. He sat down, adjusting his tie. Ava began reading the arrest report, her voice steady, each word deliberate. On April 15, the plaintiff, a black female, was detained without a warrant, without stated charges, and without access to counsel. The report cites suspicious behavior as justification. She paused, her eyes lifting to Klein. "Mr. Klein, please read the description in Section B, Paragraph 2. Klein stood, his hands trembling slightly as he read. The subject, a black female, exhibited uncooperative behavior near school premises. His voice cracked on uncooperative. Ava leaned forward. "One question, by what standard is uncooperative defined? And does black female appear in your department's risk assessment guidelines?" The room was still. Klein stammered, "Your Honor, context is needed." Ava raised a hand, not to interrupt but to redirect. "I'm not interpreting, Mr. Klein. I'm reading your words. Nothing more." She nodded to the court clerk, who activated a screen behind her. A 43-second clip played, no audio, no edits, just raw footage from a hidden station camera. Walsh tore the parking ticket, Cole drew his holster strap, and Ava was cuffed, Jaden's small figure sobbing in the background. The clip ended. Silence swallowed the room. Ava didn't speak. She let the images linger, their truth louder than any argument. Walsh's face paled. Cole gripped the table's edge. A woman in the gallery, clutching a photo of her own arrested son, let out a soft gasp, her eyes locked on Ava. Ava's gaze shifted to her for a moment, a fleeting acknowledgement, then returned to the file. She flipped to the department's proposed resolution, recommend waiving prosecution, civil settlement offered. She placed her hand on that line, her fingers still. The gesture was simple, but it felt like a verdict. "This isn't about settlement," she said, her voice low but resonant. "This is about accountability." The courtroom exhaled, as if the system itself had been forced to confront its own reflection. Ava Harper stood at the podium, a projector humming beside her. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, every breath measured. She opened a new file, a chart glowing on the screen, stark columns, red numbers, undeniable facts. "Last year," she began, her voice steady as steel, 68% of detentions without documented cause in this county involved black citizens. Each word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the gallery. She turned to the audience. "Not 10%. Not 20%. 68. The number hung in the air, heavy, unyielding. Walsh lowered his head, his hands clenching. Cole's eyes fixed on the exit, as if escape were possible. Ava clicked to the next slide. Black citizens make up 32% of the local population. Explain to me how a system calling itself just allows such a disparity without sounding an alarm." Klein, the attorney, rose, his voice thin. "Your Honor, demographics must be considered." Ava's gaze stopped him. "I've considered them. 1/3 of the population accounts for 2/3 of baseless detentions." "What does that, Mr. Klein?" Klein sat, his objection dissolving. Ava continued, "This isn't about one arrest. It's about a system that sees some people as threats before they've done anything wrong." She presented another slide, 312 detentions without warrants in 5 months. 60% lacked legal counsel. 24 cases had no record of the detained's right to a call. Her voice rose slightly, not in anger but in conviction. "What is justice if it's conditional on who you are?" A sob broke the silence, a man in the back, holding a worn photo of his daughter, arrested for loitering at a park. Ava's eyes met his, holding his pain for a heartbeat. Ava stepped forward, her presence commanding. "They say it's procedure. I ask, what procedure justifies humiliation without evidence? Detention without rights?" She clicked to a new chart, her voice cold. "These numbers aren't opinions. They're lives, reduced to statistics, buried under excuses." Walsh's shoulders shook, but he didn't look up. Cole's face was a mask, his earlier bravado gone. A woman in the gallery stood, her voice steady. "My daughter was stopped for a hoodie. No apology." Ava nodded, her eyes softening. "I hear you. This time, we're not invisible. She closed the folder, the sound sharp in the quiet. The system isn't fear mistakes. It fears being seen. Today, we see it. The courtroom trembled, not with shouts, but with the weight of truth laid bare. Ava stood before the bench, her robe a quiet contrast to the courtroom's tension. She set aside her pen, her voice softer now, almost confessional, yet piercing with purpose. "I'm not here for revenge," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I'm here to tell you about 3 times I stayed silent, believing silence would change the system. I was wrong." The gallery leaned in, caught in her cadence. "The first time," she began, "I was 22, a law student. I challenged a professor on a case law during a seminar on police immunity. I was right, but he docked my grade 4 insubordination. He said I lacked humility. If I'd been white, it would have been initiative. I didn't fight back. I thought, I'll prove myself later." A murmur stirred the room, a shared recognition. "The second time," she continued, "was after graduation. I applied to a law firm. The interviewer asked, 'Where's your real experience?' When I offered my hand, he didn't take it. They hired someone who mocked my background. I didn't complain. I thought, once I succeed, they'll see me differently. I was wrong." Her voice held steady, each word a stone laid on a path of regret. "The third time," Ava said, "I won a discrimination lawsuit against a colleague earning more for the same work. I refused interviews, declined publicity. I didn't want to be the inspiring black woman. I thought a quiet win was enough. I was wrong." She paused, her eyes meeting a young woman in the audience, a law student clutching a notebook. "Every time I stayed silent, the system thought it was right." Ava stepped closer to the bench, her gaze locking on the camera. "I'm not here to win for myself. I'm here because silence lets others lose. I believed in this system, thought I could change it from within. But change doesn't come from waiting, it comes from speaking." Walsh's hands trembled. Cole stared, his defiance crumbling. A woman in the gallery nodded, tears silent but fierce, holding a photo of her arrested brother. Ava returned to her seat, her voice firm. "I'm not perfect. I was part of this system, approving arrests I should have questioned. Now I speak, not to reclaim my name, but to name those who've been erased. This isn't about me, it's about them." The courtroom held its breath, as if history itself were listening, waiting for the system to answer for its silence. The courtroom was a crucible, the tension palpable as Ava Harper stood at the bench, her black robe a beacon of authority. The gallery was packed, eyes fixed on her every move. A new figure entered, Police Chief Reginald Hawthorne, the county's top officer, his silver epaulets glinting under the fluorescent lights. He approached the witness stand, his face a mask of practiced humility, his voice measured. "Your Honor, I represent the department. What happened was regrettable, a mistake by untrained officers. We're reviewing protocols, and I apologize for the distress caused to Ms. Harper." Ava's eyes locked onto him, unblinking, as if peeling back the layers of his polished words. She didn't respond immediately, letting the apology hang like a hollow echo in a hollow chamber. "Chief Hawthorne," she said, her voice calm but unyielding, "if I were a teacher, I couldn't say, 'It's just one failed lesson.' If I were a doctor, I couldn't claim, 'It's only one misdiagnosis.' Why does a system armed with power get to call injustice a mistake?" She opened a folder, pulling out a highlighted report. "This is your department's assessment from last April, signed by you. Page 26, no significant violations in detention procedures. Yet here we are." She held up another document. 13 complaints of unlawful detentions in the same quarter, 8 dismissed for lack of evidence. How do you conclude no violations when evidence is erased? Hawthorne's hands tightened on the stand, his composure slipping. "Those were reviewed," Ava cut him off with a glance, not sharp, but heavy with truth. Reviewed by you, Chief. You approved training protocols. You signed off on these officers' reports. Your signature is on page 13, section B 2.1, endorsing the frontline program that led to my arrest. Her words were precise, each one a nail in the coffin of his defense. The gallery stirred. A woman in the third row clutched a photo tighter, her son's face staring back, arrested without cause 2 years prior. Ava continued, an apology is not absolution. It's the first page of accountability. What actions will you taking? Not promises, audits, records, reforms. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room, a clarion call that demanded more than words. Hawthorne stepped down, his steps faltering, as if the weight of his own badge had turned against him. Ava didn't watch him leave. She turned to the bench, her gaze steady. This court isn't here for regrets. It's here for action. I request a public inquiry into this department's detention logs, cross-referenced with surveillance data. Klein, the defense attorney, rose, his voice faltering. Your Honor, that's beyond scope. Ava's eyes met his. No scope is beyond systemic failure. The courtroom exhaled, the system's shield cracking under her relentless truth. Ava stood at the evidence table, a thick brown folder before her, each page a testament to silenced voices. This case, she said, her voice resonant, is not mine alone. She opened the folder, revealing 100 detention records from the past 6 months, obtained through a court order. The courtroom fell silent, every eye on the documents, each one a life reduced to ink and indifference. She began reading, her voice a list but an elegy. Case 4, Malik Carter, 28, detained 36 hours for erratic movements while rushing his mother to the ER. No charges. She paused, letting the name breathe. Case 17, Rosa Delgado, 34, detained for noncompliance during a vehicle check, her company car deemed suspicious. No charges. Each name was a wound, each detail a scar on the system's facade. The gallery listened, their breath held. Case 42, Jamal Pierce, 19, detained for suspicious posture near a library. No record of his call request. Ava's voice was steady, unyielding, as she read 60 names, each story a mirror to her own. Klein shifted uncomfortably, his objection unspoken. A woman in the back sobbed softly, her son's name, Malik, echoing in her heart, unrecognized until now. Ava raised the folder. 87% of these cases involved minorities. 60 lacked phone call rights. 12 had no documentation. Her eyes met the camera, streaming live to millions. These aren't numbers. Their lives, Malik, Rosa, Jamal, erased by a system that calls itself just. A shutter clicked in the press row, the hashtag HarperDocket trending nationwide. She stepped back, her voice sharpening. I'm not here to shame. I'm here so the system sees, when you treat people as numbers, those numbers speak. A man in the gallery stood, holding a faded arrest report, his daughter's name scrawled in ink. I hear you, he said, his voice breaking. Ava nodded, her eyes holding his pain. This case belongs to them, she said, closing the folder with a sound that echoed like a gavel. The courtroom trembled, not with anger, but with the weight of names finally heard. The courtroom was electric, every seat filled, every gaze on Ava Harper. A young officer, Officer Caleb Ruiz, 27, stood abruptly from the right-hand row, his uniform crisp but his eyes haunted. He unpinned his badge, walked to the witness table, and placed it down gently, firmly. I don't want to be like them, he said, his voice cracking but resolute. The room froze, the act a seismic shift in the trial's rhythm. Ava looked at the badge, her expression unreadable, then met Ruiz's eyes. Thank you, she said softly, not for drama but for truth. She turned to the gallery. I was once like him, part of this system, approving arrests I should have questioned. I stayed silent, thinking it would fix itself. I was wrong. Her voice dipped, not in shame but in reckoning. I signed off on 8 detentions in my early years as a judge, she admitted. Proper forms, proper procedures, but no proper justice. I trusted the system's reports, didn't dig deeper. That was my mistake. A murmur rippled through the room, not of judgment but of awe, a judge confessing not for absolution but for change. An elderly woman rose, her voice steady. Ms. Harper, you approved my son's arrest last year, Andre, for singing in a park. You didn't know him, but I knew he was innocent. Ava stepped down, approaching her, bowing slightly. I'm sorry, she said, her voice tight but clear. The woman's eyes softened, tears falling, not of anger but of recognition. Ava returned to the bench. I can't undo what I signed, but I can rewrite what remains. Not as a judge, but as a citizen who won't let silence win. Her eyes swept the room. I speak now for Andre, for Caleb, for those still waiting. We don't stand alone. Ruiz sat, his head bowed, hands clasped. Walsh and Cole stared, their defiance shattered by Ava's quiet courage. The courtroom was no longer a trial, it was a mirror, reflecting a system's flaws through one woman's badge and another's confession. Ava's words weren't a verdict, they were a call to awaken, a reminder that silence isn't neutral, it's a choice. And this time, she chose to break it. The courtroom was a cathedral of silence as Ava Harper stood at the bench, the weight of the moment palpable. The presiding judge, Judge Carter, spoke, his voice steady but heavy. The court declares Officer Daniel Walsh permanently stripped of duty, barred from law enforcement. Officer Ethan Cole is referred for criminal investigation for tampering with records and violating civil rights. The words landed like a verdict not just on 2 men, but on a system. Walsh's head remained bowed, his hands trembling, the badge he once wielded now a ghost. Cole sat rigid, eyes fixed on the floor, his bravado gone. Ava didn't react, her gaze was beyond them, toward the gallery, the cameras, the millions watching. She opened a final folder, her voice clear, unwavering. This isn't my victory, she said. It's for those who've been silenced, for those who've waited. She held up a list of detention records. Justice isn't a title, it's action. I request a public hearing within 45 days, where this department explains its practices to the people it serves. A murmur rose, not of dissent but of agreement. Klein, the defense attorney, stayed silent, his arguments exhausted. Ava continued, no one should be cuffed for their skin, their name, their silence. We demand better, not tomorrow, now. A woman in the 4th row stood, holding a photo of her brother, arrested for resisting. Thank you, Judge Harper, she said, her voice steady. Ava nodded, a silent promise. The gallery stirred, phones recording, hashtags like #JusticeForAllies spreading. Ava placed a folded paper on the bench, her fingers brushing the wood softly. She stepped down, her steps deliberate, each one a farewell to a system she'd once served in silence. Outside, reporters waited, but Ava didn't speak. The clerk unfolded her paper, reading a single line, justice doesn't need to win. It needs to be seen. The words hit social media, shared millions of times, a movement sparked, not for Ava, but for truth. She drove away, her gray sedan quiet, unnoticed, but her legacy loud. Friends, thank you for listening to this story. Ava Harper didn't shout, didn't rage, she stood, and the system saw itself. But this isn't the end, it's your beginning. Don't stay silent. Share your stories, your truths, your silences. Where do you live? What have you seen? Your voice can break the chains of injustice. Like this story, share it, let it awaken others. Together, we're not just seeking justice, we're building it, united, with dignity, for all. Stand up, speak out, and let truth be seen.